Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary. Rutgers defensive coordinator Joe Harasymiak has been announced as the UMass head coach. So he is leaving on signing day. We will have a full breakdown of everyone who signed with Rutgers later on today, but we wanted to get this out to you as soon as possible. Before we get into why he left and kind of the circumstances behind it, this podcast is presented to you by Knight and Day Apparel. Hey, Rutgers fans, get ready to slam dunk your style with Knight and Day Apparel. Cheer on your Scarlet Knights this basketball season in our exclusive Rutgers gear. From trend-setting designs to lifestyle garments, we've got everything you need to support your team in comfort and flair. Stand out in the crowd and show your passion for Rutgers basketball with designs that celebrate every dribble, dunk, and victory. Use our promo code Rutgers Rivals to get 10% off your purchase. Don't wait, head to Knight and Day Apparel today and gear up for game day. Go Knights. We are also presented to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live bets, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL, and UFC. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. So Joe Harasymiak came over to Rutgers in 2022 from Minnesota as the defensive coordinator and has done a fantastic job in his 3 years with the program. He has, though, gotten a head coaching job, as we mentioned, and he is moving on. Just talk about kind of the circumstances behind him leaving. I know UMass doesn't seem like a very attractive job, but just talk about some of the things that you're hearing regarding the UMass opening that maybe made Harasymiak think this is a better job than maybe it would seem on the outside.
So let me pull this up again. Pete Thamel tweeted it out, broke the news today, followed by a couple other stipulations with contracts and stuff like that. So he's going to make 1.3 to 1.4 million, which is a slight upgrade from what he had. I think he was at 1.2 at Rutgers or 1.1. We know New Jersey taxes are awful, so it's he's probably
Massachusetts is much better. So
I know, yeah. That's the interesting thing. 5 years is a long deal for a first-time head coach, which is Maine technically, first-time FBS head coach.
Yep.
Looking back, he was at Maine. Obviously, his ties up there. Joe Harasymiak also despite being a New Jersey guy, spent a lot of time in Massachusetts. Went to Springfield College up there from 2004 to 2007. Also coached up at Springfield from 2009 to 2010. Then was at Maine as DB's coach, defensive coordinator, and eventually head coach from 2014 to 2018. So he knows the New England area better than most. And it's an area that's producing more and more talent each year. This is I'll give a little hat tip to Jay Poole on this one, but one of our Rutgers guys, our friend of the pod, but he posted today. If you look back when I first started covering recruiting, there was like 4 or 5 New England kids that were going Power 5. Now there's about 30, 40, maybe even 50. Connecticut schools, those prep schools are getting a kid every cycle. For example, look at Jordan Houston. You think he wasn't from Connecticut. So there you go. Rutgers guy right there, and ended up being a surefire stud. And you'll probably hear about me raving about him in the podcast later today. But so he also is getting $2 million NIL/revenue share for 2025 and $3 million in 2026. Now that doesn't seem like much when you put the numbers together with like the Big Ten is going to probably use every Big Ten and SEC school is going to use that entire 22 mil, whatever it is. But that's a lot for a program like UMass that's independent, doesn't really – I don't think they're joining a conference, but it's just that's a lot for a school that doesn't really have money at all. It's kind of insane because I feel like they should have probably used that for Don Brown, who I thought was a good coach in his own right, but obviously didn't work out. On top of that, he's getting a salary pool of $2.7 million. That's pretty decent for UMass. Like that, again, this isn't the Big Ten. It's not a high-profile job. He gets 5 years to try to rebuild it. So, and it's an area he knows really well. He wants to be a head coach. He likes being a head coach. That's an FBS head coaching job. It still looks good from Rutgers' standpoint too, because it proves you can get guys jobs. Look, Fran Brown went from Rutgers to obviously did a little stepping stone to Georgia and then got a head coaching job at Syracuse. PJ Fleck's a head coach at Minnesota. Mario Cristobal is a head coach down at Miami. Like Greg Schiano's coaching tree just continues to grow more and more. And this is just kind of another feather in his cap. It does suck to see him leave because he did lots with this defense. I mean, hell, he stripped this defense down from the studs, as Greg Schiano said, and turned it around completely from that 4-game losing streak to a not 4-game winning streak, but a 3 out of 4 game winning streak. Or I don't even know if you count it as a streak, but either way, the defense made a hell of a turnaround this year. He was working with how many guys were injured on that defense that were starters? Like 5, 6 starters, mind you. I'm not even talking to backups that got injured too, but yeah, it was a rough year. But he managed to bounce back and had a great year, and he turned it into a head coaching job. So can't really blame him. This is the way of college football now. Happening on signing day kind of sucks. I didn't expect it to come out today, but for anyone that's like, oh my God, what about the recruits? The recruits are fine. Recruits knew. They tell everyone ahead of time. This doesn't get posted without Greg telling people first or being like, hold on, let me figure some stuff out. So, yeah, I mean, it does suck to lose him, but now we have a little bit of an interesting offseason, and we'll see what Rutgers can do.
Certainly more interesting than I think any of us anticipated.
Yeah.
We were in a rare scenario where you had both coordinators coming back for multiple years in a row. You don't see many schools in the country doing that. So, you got to just tip your hat and thank Harasymiak for 3 years as the DC because, again, that doesn't happen often. I know the first thing that everybody always thinks when you lose a coach is who is on the hot list? Who is the guy we should be looking at? And again, this is still very early. I'm sure that there will be other names that emerge, but do you want to talk about some names that we think make a lot of sense for this role?
Yeah. Before I even jump to that, because I want to say this real quick, because people are asking, or at least DMing me and asking on the boards, like, is he going to take anyone with him? Like, there's not a ton of ties with Harasymiak on the Rutgers coaching staff. I know, and I'm going to pronounce his name wrong again because I got it wrong last time, but I don't know if you remember Jarrett Kite? Yeah, the former interim D-line coach when Watson ended up leaving for a little bit. I would keep an eye on him because he did coach with him at Maine. I think that would be an interesting name. I think you also have to probably keep an eye on Luke Carazola. Now, obviously, Paul Carazola, older brother, played at Rutgers. But he's also an assistant D-line coach at Rutgers right now, and he was a player at UConn and coached at UConn. So you got ties there. Keep looking through the rest of the list. There might be like another one I'm missing from his Maine days. But he's not going to take a full-time assistant, if anything. I think, if anything, he'll probably take like some of the lower-level guys, maybe. And that's just a big maybe because he does still have some connections and contacts from his time at Maine, from his time at Minnesota. And I'm sure he'll reach out to some of those guys and see what he could do there. But, overall, I don't see him really taking anyone. But moving on to coordinators. Where do I even start? I guess the most obvious name, Corey Heatherman.
Yes.
Former defensive coordinator James Madison. Obviously, they were FCS at the time when he was the defensive coordinator, but he was considered a very big hire for Rutgers because they stole a defensive coordinator from one of the better better FCS programs. Coached linebackers at Rutgers. Greg Schiano's raved about him. He now knows New Jersey. I think he's a Boston guy or Massachusetts guy in the end. But now at Minnesota.
Didn't he go to the same college as Harasymiak?
Yeah, they coached together at Springfield. They played together at Springfield, I believe. I have to double check on the playing together, but I know they definitely coached together. Either way, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And plus, you were able to steal Minnesota's coaches before. So, when you stole Harasymiak from there, you stole Kirk Shiraka from there. When in doubt, do it again.
Yeah, and I think Minnesota got a little wise to that. Talk about why that might be more complicated just to plug Corey Heatherman back in as the defensive coordinator here.
Yeah, so here's the complicated thing, and I confirmed this. There was a report out there, and I confirmed it with our Minnesota rival site, my guy Dylan over there. Apparently, the wording is if you terminate Heatherman's contract, and it's for another Big Ten team, and it's not for a head coaching job with another Big Ten team, he's required to pay 100% of his remaining salary. Now, I think if I'm correct, I believe his or not extension. I guess his salary or contract was a 3-year deal, and he's getting paid $850 a year. So that's not cheap. So you probably
$1.7 million in a buyout, and then you need to give him a raise to come back as the OC. So you're looking at probably almost $3 million to get him back on campus.
But do you just say, fuck it, we're in the Big Ten, and show your nuts and be like, hey, we're here and we're taking everyone?
I could see it. I mean, they've certainly ponied up for staff in the past. Like, you don't get the kind of experienced staff Rutgers currently has without ponying up some money. They're paying, Kirk Soraka how much money each year?
I'm sorry, I take it back. It's a 2-year contract.
Okay, so he's got...
That's huge, actually. That makes a big difference.
Yeah, so $850 is a buyout. You'd probably have to pay him $1 million, so you're more looking at like 1.9. That's doable.
Never mind. I take that back.
And in his first year as a DC, Minnesota's defense has been very, very good. Top 10 in scoring defense, top 10 in total defense. Their freshman safety led the Big Ten conference in interceptions. Corey Heatherman has, from everything I've read, been a revelation for that Minnesota defense. So I'm sure there'd be no Christmas cards exchanged this year if Greg did him dirty again in terms of PJ Fleck. But PJ Fleck's been linked elsewhere as well. So who knows what's going to happen. Obviously, that's the first and probably the betting favorite if we were to put money on the new DC. But let's talk about some other names that we think make sense. This is one that I think makes a lot of sense. Lyle Hemphill. He is the current defensive coordinator at James Madison. James Madison in the top 25 this season of the FBS in both scoring defense and total defense. He is in his first year as the DC at James Madison. Last year, he was the DC at Duke, the co-DC, I guess, and safeties coach. He led the Blue Devils to a 17th. They were 17th in scoring defense last year, and they were also top 25 in total defense. Before that, he was the DC at Wake Forest for 3 years. He was also the DC at Stony Brook before that, where he won FCS Defensive Coordinator of the Year in 2015 by Football Scoop. He's also only 24, or sorry, he's not 24. He's also only 44 years old. So he's a young guy. I think Greg likes to hire younger coaches when he has the opportunity. Kirk Soraka, the offensive side is definitely the outlier, but if you look at his defensive hires, he hasn't hired a defensive coach that's like over 50 years old in a bit. So this kind of fits. He's also from the area. He played at UMass. It's in Pennsylvania, and he went to high school in the area as well. But the more important thing is he has a connection to the staff. He was a GA at Delaware in 2004, 2005, coached with Kirk Soraka there. So he has coached with him. He also coached at Hofstra as well. So I think this one makes a lot of sense as a high quality plan B if we can't get Corey Heatherman. Who are some names that you think make sense?
I feel like he gets mentioned every time there's an opening on the Rutgers defensive side between linebackers last year. Defensive coordinator a couple years ago, Tim Lukabu. I said Tim. I think it's Tim Lukabu, if I pronounce that correctly. Rutgers guy, coached at Rutgers as a player development dude back in 06, 07. Coached at Rutgers outside linebackers 2010, 2011. Went down to Tampa with Greg as a defensive assistant in the NFL for 2 years. And also spent some time in the NFL with the 49ers, Bengals, and Carolina Panthers most recently where he's at. And he survived the coaching change there, which is always interesting. From Frank Reich to who's their new coach? I don't even know who Carolina's new coach is. But besides the point, so SEC coaching experience in Mississippi State, NFL ties, Rutgers ties. Oh, and he's been a Power 5 defensive coordinator at Boston College, where he is credited for developing Donovan Ezekuru. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the guy that's really good at defensive end from Boston College.
The Williamstown native, Aaron Lewis's high school teammate, who Lord knows how we didn't land that kid, but he led college football in sacks this year, the FBS.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So
Pretty good.
he also had top 50 defenses in several categories. I'm looking at Boston College. Ranked third nationally in opposing passing yards per game. He has linebacker experience, and that's kind of something you're going to lack now that Harasymiak's gone, because no one else on staff can coach linebackers.
Yep.
I mean, I guess they could, but it's just they never have before officially.
Yeah. Another name that's too obvious because he's been mentioned over and over in Tim. A guy that's a little bit off the board here that I think could make some sense. Current Louisiana Lafayette defensive coordinator Jim Salgado. And typically when you are talking about coaches from, the South or the middle of nowhere, which is kind of where ULL is, you wouldn't think they have ties to the Northeast, but Jim Salgado does. So Jim Salgado is in his first year as the defensive coordinator at ULL. He previously had spent 6 seasons as a defensive backs coach with the Buffalo Bills. So he's helped develop a lot of really high-end corners and safeties there. You think Tre'Davious White, you think Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Before that, he was a defensive coordinator for Princeton for 7 years under Bob Surace. He went to college at Hofstra. He is a New York native. He coached at Michigan State for a year in 2023 in Mel Tucker's final year. He coached at Syracuse. He coached at Cornell. So this is a guy who's basically coached in the Northeast his entire career, and he's done a good job as the DC for ULL, and he did a good job under Bob Surace at Princeton for 7 years as well.
Would make a lot of sense, to be honest with you. I got a little bit of a different one for you. A little bit of a different connection, too. So Will Wyndham, he's one of the top 50 defenses in college football right now per PFF, has not really ties to the region. Mississippi guy, born and raised, Mississippi State grad, born and raised, or educated, played at whatever. I believe he also played at Iowa State as a defensive lineman, so he has college experience playing. Went through the ladder of just about anything to get every single step to get to defensive coordinator. South Alabama defensive coordinator right now, and linebackers coach. And safeties coach. But coached at Mississippi State as a GA, coached at Penn State as a GA, so Big Ten ties. Coached at Davidson as a D-line coach, coached at Georgia, pretty notable, and then also coached at Kent State alongside Colin Farrell for a couple years from 2018 to 2020. He was the inside linebackers coach for Kent State, so he has familiarity with Colin Farrell already. He's coaching a pretty damn good defense. He's coached safeties as well, which is almost kind of Harasymiak's role at Rutgers, because he was going between nickels, DBs, and then eventually linebackers. So I mean, it's a notable guy. There's that one's a little bit of a reach. I feel like the other names are more confident in, but it is a name. It's a name to keep an eye on, I guess.
A name that I don't expect to be the guy we end up with, but a name to keep in mind. You never know what's going to happen with Ohio State. If Ohio State putters out of the college football playoff, well, not Vrabel. If he gets let go because they lose in the first round of the college football playoff, their staff will be open game. So Jim Knowles is their current defensive coordinator, and Ohio State's like the number one defense in basically every metric. Not every metric, but they're very highly ranked in a lot of areas. Number one in total defense. And Jim Knowles is a Philly guy. He went to St. Joe's Prep. He went to college at Cornell. Before he was the Ohio State defensive coordinator, he was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State and Duke. He was also the head coach at his alma mater for 6 years, from 2004 to 2009. Just a name to file away. Again, that's a bit of a shoot for the moon, but I think if things go south with Ohio State in the college football playoff, I think he is a name that could be on the market this offseason.
How about this for a name? I'm going to throw one at you, and you tell me your original thoughts, because I just don't see it happening personally. But Summit, New Jersey native, Rutgers University alumni, lax player, football snapper, son of a legendary NFL head coach. Washington current defensive coordinator Steven Belichick.
You got to put him on the list. Washington had a pretty good defense this year. They were 27th in total defense. In terms of scoring defense, I think they were pretty up there as well. I don't know why we didn't mention that earlier, honestly.
I know. I forgot about him. But also reportedly makes $1.2 million, so that's a lot of money. So you're going to have to top that, of course, and probably buy him out as well.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers has shown they're willing to spend some money for the right coach, so we will see. And he's also fitting into that young coach archetype that we had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. I think he's got a lot of promise. And he obviously knows
1.3 this year. So, yeah. Upcoming year, whatever. But, I mean, hey, and Belichick, it's Shiano. They're close, obviously, so.
Yep.
Has to be a name.
Is there any other coaches that you want to mention? I'm at the end of my list here, personally.
No, not really. I know we talked off pod about Jules Montanar of East Carolina, the defensive pass game coordinator. Coach at Temple for a couple years, or a year as a cornerbacks coach. James Madison guy as well, which I don't know if that overlaps with Heatherman or not. I got to double check on that one, but also coached at Alabama, grad assistant coaching the defense at Alabama under Nick Saban, working alongside Kirby Smart as well, which is pretty huge. Naples, Florida guy, played at West Virginia during the Big East days, I believe. So it's another name. I don't really think so. I think our first couple plus Belichick are probably the most likely scenarios. I think Lyle Hempel makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
almost too much sense, to be honest with you. But no, I mean, I don't think I'm kind of confident Rutgers is going to find a pretty good hire here. Shiano's known as a good defensive coach. There's a lot of money on the table, and there's only so many SEC and Big Ten jobs, and we know that those two conferences are far and above the rest. So,
yeah, no, I think this is an attractive job. So I think there's probably some head coaches at the FCS and Group of 5 level that might end up being in the running for this as well. You've seen a lot more coaches take what 10 years ago would have been seen as a step back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at what a guy like Matt Entz did this past year, coaching North Dakota State, and then joins the USC staff to be the assistant head coach, not even a coordinator. You just saw Gus Malzahn leave UCF to be the OC at Florida State. You know, you've seen a bunch of guys do this. Sean Lewis left the Kent State job to be the OC at Colorado.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as taboo as it probably would have been 10 years ago. But so keep an eye on those, because Rutgers can certainly pay more money than a lot of these Group of 5s can for a head coach, for his defensive coordinator.
That list keeps going on, because South Alabama's coach left to be obviously DC at Bama, and then Buffalo's head coach left to be an assistant at Bama. So or Georgia, one of the two, I forget, whatever. But yeah, I think that there's there's going to be a lot of interest in this job. Is the timing suck? Yeah, a little bit, but I'd be a little shocked if he coached a bowl game. I know we didn't talk about that, but I don't know for sure yet. I'll find out later today probably, but I'm sure Greg will say it in his presser later today. I'm sure that's going to be the first question asked, even though I want it to stay recruiting topics, but that obviously is not going to happen anymore.
Yeah. Yep. What time's that presser today?
4:30, I believe. So yes, 4:30. Got to double check some stuff. Jeez. Kids are still signing. We'll have another pod later today, as you said before. Thomas Amakwa, transfer portal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's news. I mean,
do you want to talk about the one guy we didn't include on the pod later today? The Richmond flip from this morning.
Yes, Jonathan. Damn it, we got it wrong.
Insigna.
Yes, from the Hun School. Jonathan Insigna from the Hun School, linebacker, 6'2", 230. Greenwich, Connecticut kid, transferred to the Hun School this season and kind of just blew up, became, what was his exact honor that he got? He was a defensive player of the year and first team all New Jersey prep, quote unquote, A defense. So whatever that group is for prep schools. But defensive player of the year for New Jersey, like absolute freak athlete. It looks like on tape. This is the first time I watched him. I know people are going to watch or look at his profile and be like, Bryant, Colgate, Richmond. What the hell? Like he flipped from Richmond. Like I wouldn't even bother with that. I think he's just a late riser. I think he's a kid that no one really knew about. He looks really physical, a great blitzer, really good run defender, and he's elite in coverage, man. He's got four interceptions on the year. Really good football IQ and just blows up anyone that like any gap basically that pops up. Like he is able to hit those gaps hard, hit the running back in the backfield. I know I talked to his coach this morning and he kind of just told me, he's like, he compared him to a lunch pail type kid, like blue collar kid, like just compared to Brian Urlacher, which I mean, if we're going based on the rest of the podcast that it's going to be released later, every coach has always a little bit of coach speak, but he seems just like a really talented, like athletic, strong kid. And he's muscular as hell, man. Like he's huge. I don't know where they find these linebackers at Hun between him and Kamar Archie. And I know Kamar Archie was hurt this season, so he didn't really get to see much of him. But that had to be like one of the best duos in like the Northeast between those two at linebacker. I highly recommend watching his tape to anyone that hasn't before judging him. Don't judge a book by its cover, but I like this kid. I don't think he's a 4-star, but I think he's a solid 3-star by far. I think this is a kid that just flew way under the radar, and Rutgers got a nice little snag there, considering they don't even have a linebackers coach.
Yeah, no, it's a big pickup. This is a guy who had to fill in some big shoes this season as the main linebacker for Hun because Kamar Archie missed a lot of time, so he was able to shine. So, yeah, it's a good pickup. I always trust the staff with these late additions because more often than not they end up being contributors. So,
I mean, you also have to look. It's 105 ships now. Like, will they use all 105 to be determined? You can use partial ships now too. That's a new thing with football now, which is going to be really complicated and really annoying. It's just the new rules. Like it's instead of, I think wrestling did it a lot. I think baseball and softball did it a lot. They would give partial ships here, partial ships there. So you can get kids like this and take risks on them, and it's fine. Like if you think the kid has a high ceiling, you take them. Say screw it. I got 105 roster spots now. I can go mess around and give this kid 20%, this kid 10%, and they'll join us over, say, a Richmond, over a lower level school. And you need good practice players. You can't just be practiced against, I know they're ironic practice dummies, but like you need better than that. You need an actual practice player that knows what he's doing. So can't just throw Daniel Jones at safety and just expect it to work, you know?
Yep.
Anyway.
Yep, totally agree. So look in your feed later today for another episode breaking down every signee in the class of 2025 other than Insigna because he was not on the list when we recorded earlier. Yeah. But that's all I got. Stay tuned on the boards and your podcast feeds. If we have any updates on the coaching search, if we have any updates on the transfer portal, we will certainly keep you up to date with that. That opens on Monday, so strap up. It's going to be a wild off season for Rutgers. The bowl game will probably be announced early next week. So lots going on. Stay tuned. There's not many more games left to be played on the gridiron this year, but there's certainly a ton of news that will be coming. So stay tuned. We also are running a giveaway right now. Spotify Wrapped dropped today. And we put a tweet out. We will retweet it again. But what we're doing is we're going to give away this Dylan Harper autograph card, which Richie has in his hands here. If you're listening at home, you don't have the video. It is a Dylan Harper autographed card. Leaf. And the winner will be chosen at random from people who reply or retweet or quote tweet the tweet that we will have linked in the show with your Spotify Wrapped if the Knight Report podcast is in it. So if you don't have us in it, you're not qualified to enter this contest. But if you are, screenshot it and post it as a reply or as a quote tweet. And we will give that away in the next few days. So just another way we're trying to say thank you to you guys. But
Sweet.
All right. Well, that's all we got. For me and Rich, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast, signing off.